Welcome to another week of the Swords and Sports Podcast. One man's journey to read 52 fantasy books in 52 weeks and create 52 podcasts documenting the experience. I'm your host, Mike Mogues, the man embarking on this journey. And this week, I have a huge guest, the one and only Anna, the Hammer, Stevens. And she's here to talk about her book, Godblind, which is book one of the Godblind trilogy. I love when the first book is the same name as the trilogy. That interview, of course, is coming up after these announcements. If you're wondering why, if you're watching on the YouTube, which I highly suggest you do, you could always subscribe. The YouTube is the Swords and Sports Podcast. Also subscribe on all those other listening platforms. And you're wondering why I have two mics like a lower tier professional sports league. It's because I read a comment on YouTube that said, I wasn't sure about the interview until I got to the part where the author was on. And that was on the Christian Cameron interview, if you're wondering. Which meant that was a direct cut at me and my production issues, which I have probably talked about on here ad nauseum. I don't know what I'm doing. So, I know the audio is terrible on the videos, so I'm trying out a new thing. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. One week, I filmed the whole thing in slow-mo, and the video quality was horrible. If you can figure out what episode that was, just know that that's why. So, this show is going to keep on rolling. I think I did the self-promo stuff, but subscribe because I want to quit my job and do this full-time, and then I want my job to be earning the approval of internet strangers. For all details about the show and upcoming episodes, you can follow me on all the social media platforms. Instagram, I'm doing clips. I'm trying to bust out more of those, but I'm not doing a great job of that. And for all the news, that's the Twitter account. Both of those are at Swords and Sports. Let's get into these book details because I'm rambling. The book, of course, is Godblind. The author is Anna Stevens, and her dog. Her dog is also featured. The series is Godblind. It was published on June 20th, 2017. It's a finished trilogy. The hardcover is 408 pages. The publisher is Talos. She has a new book out, The Stone Knife, that just came out, I think, last year, so go check that out as well. The books in the series are Godblind, Dark Soul, and Bloodchild. Those are some dark-ass sounding names. I mean, this book is considered grimdark, whatever you want to call grimdark, if you even think it's a real category or subcategory. But those are some grimdark-ass names. Dark Soul. Bloodchild. This book was a nominee for the Book Nest Award for Best Debut Novel. I don't know who it lost to, but I imagine that it had to be close because this book was fantastic. As a spoiler warning, as always, the second half of the interview contains spoilers for the book that we are talking about. In this case, that's Godblind. If you haven't read the book yet, what the hell are you doing? Without further ado, my friend, Anna Stevens. Anna is currently figuring out what her dog wants to do, and we might be interviewing the dog, which would be an exciting thing to do. Regardless.
He's got a squeaky pig, so I'm hoping you can't pick it up on the microphone, but there is a lot of squeaky pig action going on right now.
All right, let's just do this. This is great. I want it to be as chaotic as possible. This is not a formal show, trust me.
Oh, good.
It's another week of the Swords and Sports Podcast. And we have started with chaos already. Be careful, you hear a squeaky pig in the background. That's Anna's dog. But I am super excited to bring the author of the Godblind and the Songs of the Drowned trilogy, the one and only Anna, the Hammer Stevens. Welcome to the show.
Yay. Hello. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really looking forward to this one. I've heard good things.
I'm sure they weren't from this person. Cameron Johnston said, and I quote, "The only question you should ask her is the hammer," which is not a question.
It's more of a comment. Oh, I'm out. Sorry. I'm still not coming out with you.
Maybe if the interview goes badly, you could just go right out with the dog, be like, I gotta go.
Yeah, just not come back. Just drop the headphones. Oh my God. Come on then. Sorry. The only place I can film, like, with a decent backdrop is right next to the door, which he takes as a personal challenge. So it's like, the door is closed, I must go out. He's like a cat. Oh my God, I've just realized I've got a poodle that thinks it's a cat.
Listen, this is a pro puppy podcast, so it is
that's
absolutely
all right,
fine.
That's good.
At some point, you're going to have to show him if we keep having to hear him. So
I can do that.
All right. I've got a ridiculous one for you. You recently tweeted about a book you were reading that has the chapter 5 titled The Professor's Testicle. What did we learn about that?
What did we learn about the testicle in general? The actual testicle?
I mean, I guess I just have so many questions about this. Like, what book is this?
Okay, let's start with the book. That's probably slightly more sensible. The book is called The Knife Man, and it's a biography of John Hunter, who was a Scottish surgeon, who is basically credited with being the founder of modern Western surgery. So he was an anatomist. He ran gangs of body snatchers so that they had fresh corpses to dissect in anatomy school, and all sorts of things. It's really, really good, but it is very, very clear on, in 1750, this is what they thought was wrong with you, and this is what they did to make you better, which has been quite eye-watering. And that is me saying that.
Right.
So the professor's testicle was actually it was the race to map the internal structure of the testicle. So basically what they were doing was they were exhuming fresh corpses from the local graveyards, and then they were removing the testicles and then injecting them with mercury, so that then when they open them up, they could see the tracery of tubes and all sorts. So yeah, this guy there was nothing this guy would not try and would not do. He used to regularly taste fluids that came out of bodies, and he was like, well, when they've been dead for 24 hours, it tastes like this. When they've been dead for 3 days, it tastes like that. And I'm like, there's probably a reason for that, mate. Yeah, I mean, he did a whole thing about if he held semen in his mouth for a particular amount of time, how the consistency changed over time. And I'm just like, oh my God, you haven't got the slightest clue what you're doing, but I applaud your dedication anyway. I highly recommend it. It is gross as fuck. Sorry, am I allowed to swear?
You can swear all the fuck you want on here.
Okay, cool. It is pretty gross, but it's fascinating at the same time. Just the things that they thought they knew, and the how they realized that they actually didn't know anything. And it's good. I would really recommend it, but you need to be in a particular frame of mind, or you need to be not grossed out by stuff like that.
So what frame of mind? Hungry?
Bored, just woken up, just about to go to bed, nightmare fuel for days.
That sounds like all the times. So does this guy have any like official backing?
You didn't need basically any qualifications to become a surgeon in the 18th century Britain. You could literally, there's a reason why they used to be called barber surgeons, was because they were literally hairdressers who also amputated limbs. I mean, the two go hand in hand, right? A little off the top, sir, and your arm, so.
This would have been a great moment if I showed that I'm bald and I was missing like a finger. But
I know, yeah.
Unfortunately, fortunately, what am I talking about?
Fortunately. Are you going back out? Sorry, the dog's going out again. Go on. Go.
Bye.
Oh, now you're just going to stay here. Okay, fine.
And I don't know. And you're assuming I'm going to edit that stuff out. I don't. I just leave it all in.
Perfect.
This guy is like, if you gave me medical backing and was like, start trying to discover things. And I'd be like, I have no idea what I'm doing. We're just going to eat a body and see what happens.
That's pretty much, that was how they did it. he also did a lot of experiments on live animals, which is obviously far more gross and
this is gonna offend
unallowed.
more people than the human stuff, always.
Yeah. I mean, they're talking about how they would cure blockages in the male urethra, which is literally by poking a stick up it until the blockage breaks apart or goes back up into the bladder. That was it. That was how you treated blockages in the 18th century in Britain. And I'm like, totally fine with that. But when he talks about, dissecting a living animal, I'm like, no,
right.
Just go and stab someone's dick instead.
Oh my God, I love this direction. I mean, at least that makes sense. There's a blockage, block it up. But don't touch the puppies.
Yeah, leave the puppies, please.
As I said, Pro Puppy Podcast. You've done a lot of interesting research on this kind of stuff. So what is up with this tree that kills people?
The tree that kills people. Okay, so for the Songs of the Drowned trilogy, which is out now, thank you, is based on Central American climate and geology and flora and fauna and all that kind of stuff. There is a tree in Central America called the manchineel tree, and it is the most poisonous tree in the world. Every single part of the tree, so the bark, the sap, the roots, the leaves, the fruit, are all poisonous and highly toxic. If you burn the tree, or you burn branches or leaves of the tree and you breathe it in, you basically go into respiratory failure. If you get any of the sap on your skin, it basically eats away at your skin like an acid. Oh, nice. If during monsoon season, if rain falls onto the tree and then drips off the leaves onto your skin, you get blisters. I mean, this is how toxic it is.
This tree is awesome.
This tree is awesome. And I was like, if it learns to walk, we're all dead. We're fucked. If it becomes a triffid, we're done for. So obviously, as soon as I read it, I was like, that is going in the book. Somewhere, somehow, that is going in the book.
I feel like I should have heard of this thing before.
Yeah, I mean, it is mostly just located. Hello, dog. It's mostly just located in Central America. Go.
Your ability not to lose train of thought is incredible here.
Yo, I hate you. I love you, but I hate you. Yeah, so that went in, but there's also what's even cooler and is definitely in book 2 is the bullet ant, which obviously I couldn't call the bullet ant because bullets don't exist in my civilization. But the reason why it is locally known as the bullet ant is because it actually feels like you've been shot when it bites you. It's like, is that the pain threshold is like on the pain scale is just so high that that people are like literally just sobbing their hearts out and it lasts for like 48 hours or something.
So and there was bullet hand?
The bullet ant.
Oh, ant. Sorry. A little tiny ant? Oh no.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's the TV show Deadly 60. I think it's called Deadly 60 with Steve Backshall, who's a British naturalist. And he basically goes and finds the 60 most lethal animals in the world. And he went to Central America and he went there is a tribe in Central America who used the bullet ant as like a test of manhood. And he basically had to put his hand in these like baskets that were full of bullet ants, and he just had to wait for them all to sting him. And he did it. And he passed it and everything. And then he came out afterwards and he literally just curls up in a ball on the floor and starts sobbing.
That's great like, TV though.
Yeah, I mean, awesome TV. But yeah, so that's in the book as well, obviously.
Okay. You also have another guy that you mentioned about research. I'm feeling like I'm finding a trend with you here, and I find it interesting, but maybe other people wouldn't. This Jason Schmidt guy, he just lets
Oh,
like bees
the
sting him.
the insect, yeah, the sting directory. Yeah. So he came up, I think he coerced something like 83 different species of insect to bite or sting him, and then he created a scale as to like what it feels like if you get stung by a wasp up to the bullet ant basically. And his description was you feel like you've been chained in a active lava flow.
Oh,
And I'm like,
great.
it rates the highest on the Schmidt pain scale.
Which is what he made up,
Go
which
on
is
then.
great.
Yes, he's gone, which he made up himself. But I'm all about people actually testing these things in real
Right.
life.
Don't talk about it, be about it.
Precisely, which is why I quite like this John Hunter book. I mean, I would never do anything that fucking stupid in my life, but I respect people who do.
I'm not sure that you wouldn't at this point. You're
My
like
curiosity can be my downfall. This is true.
you're doing all the research of someone who likes to dip their wants to get in the game and get off the bench.
Well, I mean, if we ever meet in real life and I'm missing a finger, we'll know that there is a story there somehow.
I want to say these people are doing this before TikTok came out. Now they'd be superstars.
Oh my God, can you imagine? I mean,
We're
parental warnings ever slapped all over it, but
I
yeah.
mean, people are doing this without not even for Instagram. What's the point if you're not gonna get the validation from strangers?
Well, you don't get the endorphin rush of the likes, do you? I mean, clearly they are just dedicated professionals to science and pain.
Yes. But this is such a good lead in because you claim that you just like to observe this, but you are not a stranger to pain. I saw a picture of you with your cheek absolutely mangled.
Oh, yes. I can see you've done your stalking.
Yes, that's a big thing on this show, stalking. Nice if people called it research.
Research stalking is a fine line.
Science,
yes,
twigs
yes.
up your urethra, fine line.
I did, yeah. I mean, I didn't actually go to hospital with it, but I'm pretty sure that I cracked my cheekbone. Yeah, probably. Yeah, that was a couple of years ago. I got that. This is the coolest line I will ever speak. I got it in a sword fight.
That was so sick.
So I've been studying historical European martial arts, or HEMA, particularly Italian longsword. And the thing about sword fighting and things like that is that this whole thing that you see in all the films where someone just picks a sword up off the battlefield and carries on fighting, and it's someone else's sword and blah blah blah.
The coolest thing ever.
Is the coolest thing ever is bullshit. It doesn't work. The reason why it doesn't work is because people have or had swords made to fit them, their physique, at least in the European martial art tradition. Things like the Roman legions or the gladii were exactly the same length. So you could literally pick one up off the battlefield. But if you're talking about like medieval European fighting or anything like that, swords were made for individuals, so they were weighted accordingly and they were the right length. So what I was doing was I was fighting with somebody else's steel, because at that point I only had it's not plastic, but I had I had a heavy fake sword basically, which was the right weight, but it is basically just made of like a really hard plastic,
right.
Which you can't use when you're fighting someone else who's got a steel. So I borrowed someone's steel that was about 4 or 5 centimeters too long for me, which means that when you're in a particular guard, which is where the sword is over your shoulder, as I went in to counter because the sword was bigger and the crossguard was wider, I caught the crossguard under my own mask. This is a completely self-inflicted injury. Caught the crossguard under my own mask, ripped my mask half off my head as my opponent smashed me in the face with his sword. So because my mask,
call that self-inflicted. I mean, I thought you. I mean, I heard the story.
Half self-inflicted.
If you whacked yourself in the face, it would have made a funnier story. But
I mean, due to the pandemic, I haven't trained for a very long time. That is probably what's going to happen the first time I go back. I'm just going to be like, yeah, okay.
Did this person buy you a drink after they mangled your cheek?
This person who was actually my instructor. So
no.
It was just deeply apologetic. It was just a pure accident. He was 3/4 of the way through his move. I was responding too slowly. He was always going to have hit me in the head anyway, because he's my instructor and I'm shit. But because of this crossguard issue and the fact that instead of my mask being there, it was there. So I couldn't see anything anyway, because I turned it sideways on my own head. But like the padding around the sides is a lot weaker, because you're not supposed to aim around there. So yeah, so his sword basically just impacted right across my cheekbone, which hurt a lot.
I mean, it looked
quite a
painful.
It swelled up really fast, but it wasn't really until I got up the next morning and I was like, oh, there's a lot of bruising.
That's not good.
Yeah, so it probably, I mean, it's like if I poked it, it still hurt for about 6 to 8 weeks afterwards, which makes me think there was probably a crack in the bone. But
well, how many times did you poke it?
Every few times a day. Does it still hurt? Yeah. Like kids picking scabs.
Right.
It's that kind of thing. It's like, oh, it hurts. Do it again.
I mean, especially based on this conversation, this does not surprise me that you started experimenting on yourself. That's usually how this goes. Well, think about it. If anything, you got a great picture out of it that you could post everywhere.
I got a series of great pictures out of it as the bruising, as it sort of trailed, like, when bruises go green and disgusting and end up sinking down because of gravity. Yes. So I ended up with like a yellow jaw for a couple of days. I was like, oh my God, that's deeply so cool. Unpleasant.
That is cool. Cool. You're a deadly woman though. You're also a black belt.
I am. Yeah, Shotokan karate.
So who wins in a fight, you or Sam Hawk?
Oh, I have been asked this before.
I don't want to ask you a question you've already been asked before.
No. I mean, if I can keep Sam at a distance, I reckon I will be able to score enough points from kicks. But if she gets close enough to me, I'm dead on the floor in a broken, weeping heap.
Just don't accept any drinks from her, because she will poison you.
She actually bought me dinner at WorldCon in Dublin in 2019.
Bad, shouldn't have taken that.
I know. I don't know whether there was some sort of suggestible drug in there or something, but we found out that Devin Madsen couldn't do the panel that her and Sam were supposed to be doing because she'd lost her voice. So I was like halfway through my meal with Sam, and she got a phone call and found out that Devin couldn't do the panel, and she literally just put her hand on my shoulder and said, "Don't worry, I've got a replacement." And I was like, what? So we then had like 15 minutes walking back to the convention center, and I was like, what panel? What am I doing? What am I supposed to be talking about? And that was to say I was unprepared for that panel. And I'd been drinking for a few hours by that point. So
this must have been fun.
Oh, it was a great panel. I loved it. I'm not sure how much sense I made, but
do you think honestly, sometimes it's better to just be dropped into it. Did you get to finish your meal at least? Because that would have bothered me.
We did. I mean, we were sort of there, and it was quite a busy restaurant, and I think we had to wait something like half an hour for the food to come up. And as they served us, Sam asked for the bill.
Oh, God.
And we were just like sort of like running back to the convention center going, have I got cheese in my teeth? We're so honestly, Sam and I are just professional all the way.
Oh, 100%. I got that when I interviewed her. Now I can see you're just two peas in a pod. Okay. Speaking of injuries, I think the biggest injury you could sustain of all is working at a standing desk. Every morning you
Right?
work at a standing desk.
I'm at my standing desk right now.
Are you standing right now?
This is why I keep fidgeting. This is
Holy
why I'm like dancing.
Look how mobile you are. This is pretty
I know.
impressive. Maybe I
Yeah.
should employ. Every morning I wake up and my knees hurt. How do you work at a standing desk all day?
I used to have, because I worked in an office like from the time I was 18, basically. And I started getting really bad lower back pain.
Right.
And
I think I'm
then
experiencing that right now.
and one of the most common causes of lower back pain is because you spend too much time sitting. So what I did was I invested in a standing desk and like a bar stool to sit on. So I thought what I'm going to do is I'm going to I'll stand for an hour and then I'll sit for an hour and then I'll stand for an hour and I'll sit for an hour and I'll sort of build myself up to it. The bar stool that I bought is the most uncomfortable chair I have ever sat on in my entire life. I would rather sit on the Iron Throne if they hadn't blunted the swords than sit on that bar stool. So basically, the bar stool is now used to prop my laptop on when I'm playing D&D and I'm sitting on the sofa. It doesn't get used for anything else. So I was pretty much thrust in the deep end of standing at my standing desk. And I really like it. I mean, it's good if I'm dictating.
Right.
Because, as long as I've got a long enough cable, I can basically just wander up and down while I'm dictating. So it just gives me a little bit more freedom. You just get used to it, and I no longer have back pain.
There you go. I don't believe it because standing is tiring, but I'll take your word for it because you're on the other end of this microphone and I kind of have to. Okay. I was reading something and it was interesting to me. You said that your latest book, The Stone Knife, came from the image of feet in the sand that was from a daydream.
It was bare feet in really rich black soil.
Do you think that your mind was telling you, please take a vacation and stop working so hard? And you thought, oh, great, new book idea.
Quite possibly. Yes. I mean, it was, I started sort of coming up with the ideas around the Songs of the Drowned trilogy while I was editing Dark Soul, I think, which is my second book. So I was already sort of thinking about what I was going to do after the conclusion of the Godblind trilogy.
And it wasn't take a vacation.
And it wasn't take a vacation. No, it was work harder. So yeah, I mean, I'm a very visual. I'm very visual when I write and when I come up with ideas and stuff like that. It tends to be, there's no sort of conscious thinking that goes on. I'll hear a line of dialogue, or I will see the outline of a person, or bare feet in black soil kind of thing. But the thing about that particular image, it meant that it kind of clarified a lot of stuff, because I've been thinking about different climates and locations for the new trilogy. I didn't really want to go down I didn't want it to be too similar to the Godblind trilogy, which is very typical medieval-esque European fantasy landscape. I wanted to go somewhere really different. And I'd been thinking about doing it on an ice sheet or in a desert or something totally different. And then I thought, no, because if they're standing in rich black soil, that means that they're in a very fertile place. So that kind of took away a couple of my options, which therefore narrowed down where I should be looking on planet Earth as inspiration.
I think your mind was telling you to take a vacation and it had the opposite effect.
I mean, I haven't had yeah, let's not go there. I don't know when the last time I had some time off was.
You know what? I'll keep hoping for you.
Thanks. Me too.
I ask a lot of authors this, and I've been met with mixed resistance. Can I have this sci-fi novel that you have hidden on your hard drive?
Hell no.
All right.
No, 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 no. I do have one. It's so awful. It's so bad. It's also hard sci-fi, or it was what I thought of as hard sci-fi. As a friend of mine did a PhD in astrophysics, and every time we went out drinking, he would tell me what he was working on at the time, and like redshift and solar sails and like quantum mechanics and and all this kind of stuff. So I wrote a whole book based on what I could recall from our drunken conversations in the pub. Oh, it was so bad. And also somehow I convinced myself that you can use a solar sail and still get up to like almost the speed of light, which clearly you can't. You would need to be moving at a increasing speed for like probably a million years before you would ever get anywhere close enough. By which point you would have moved out of the range of several stars, and therefore you wouldn't be getting the push on your solar sails. So terrible. And the characters were awful, and it was first person. Oh my god, no.
At this point,
never see the light of day.
I'm too scared to ask what solar sail is, so I gotta pretend to know what that is. But don't give it to Stephen Arian before you give it to me. That's really okay. That's really my whole thing. I just don't want him to have anything that I should.
That's fair enough.
I saw somewhere that I wasn't sure of the seriousness of this, and based on this conversation, I actually could believe it, that you just roll D&D dice to determine, if you need to write more or if you need to go to lunch or something.
Occasionally, yeah, especially when I'm on deadline.
So that's when you should take the chance.
Yeah. I mean, that's a perfect opportunity. Is like when you've only got a week left to deliver your book is when you start rolling a D20 on how many words you should write that day. But it was just I was deep in drafting, and my deadline was approaching far too quickly. So it was actually a case of what was happening was I was kind of like blasting through lunch and not eating anything, and then getting to like 4:00 and be like so at my sort of like wobbling at my standing desk, like, oh god, I feel so faint, what could possibly be the problem? And then realizing that I hadn't eaten. So I kind of like had like a recurring little reminder pop up on my computer that at like 1:00 I had to roll a D20, and if I got 15 or above, I had to write another 500 words before I could have lunch. And if I got like 10 to 15, it had to be 250 words. And if it was anything under 10, I had to go and have lunch right now. And I don't know why, it didn't make any sense, but it kind of, it was this sort of thing to try and turn chores that I had to do into like a slightly more fun thing.
All right.
And it sounds ridiculous when I speak it out loud.
Well, it so sounds like no problem. It sounds like your first human experiment, and this is kind of become the prevalent theme of this interview. And you know what?
Secretly, I'm Victor Frankenstein.
Well, if you rolled a D20, you would say we're going to the next part of this interview, which is the spoilery book part of it. So as always, the second part is a spoilers podcast, because I find it just a lot more fun. We're here to talk about Godblind. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
God, it's gorgeous.
It is gorgeous.
My first question is Lanta's death finger. What a fucking crazy way to determine who gets sacrificed.
I mean, it is a crazy idea. It is actually based on, like when you're a kid and you're told that it's rude to point.
Okay. Yes.
So maybe that might be slightly more British. I don't know. But certainly when I was a kid, I was always told it was rude to point. And that is like it's a hangover from like hundreds of years ago, where your index finger was a witch's cursing finger.
What?
So
really?
yeah. So the reason why it's rude to point is because doing that is how witches would curse somebody.
Oh my God. Here in
So
America, what's rude shifts every day, it feels like. So maybe that might not even be
I
rude
mean,
anymore.
yeah, it's probably not rude here anymore, but yeah, I definitely heard it from my grandmother when I was little. She'd be like,
Okay.
but it's also impossible to do. Is like, what do you want from the sweet shop? I want that. It's rude to point. Okay,
Yeah.
like fourth from the left, the green ones. So
Forcing you to stretch your minds, be a little more
well, there
descriptive.
is that. There is that. Maybe she was secretly doing me a favor. I don't know. But yeah, so that's where the death finger comes from.
Okay. I think the biggest accomplishment in this book is convincing everybody to just line up in an audience chamber and let one person just swing the finger around.
I mean, the fact that if you tried to slip away and she saw you doing it, you'd be next up anyway.
Right. Well, you get
you've
pointed
actually
out real quick.
Yeah, you've got a better chance if you just stand there really quietly, and preferably behind someone taller and wider than you are.
Oh, that's
which is
true.
what I do. I just
Yeah, you see everybody just line up in a single file.
yeah, behind the one guy who's like, what?
Come
What?
on.
What are you
Why's
doing
it
back
gotta
there?
be? Why's it gotta be me? These red gods, they couldn't wait 5 years to make it an even 1,000 years.
I know, dicks, absolute dicks.
I found that to be ruder than anything else they did in this.
You clearly haven't read the sequels. They get pretty rude in the sequels.
I don't know. That's rude. Impatience is not a virtue.
That is true. That is true. But also because I think in one of the earliest drafts, it was 1,000 years. And then I was like, everything's always 1,000 years. And that's,
right.
And that's like, it's so convenient. So I was like, screw it, let's knock 5 years off. And just basically just to be like, no, I'm not going to go with what everyone else writes in fantasy and say 1,000 years ago. I'm going to say, no, 995 years ago this happened.
Anna the Contrarian.
I am. I'm so contrarian.
If you saw a dude stop an arrow in the air like fucking Keanu in the Matrix, how fast would you convert?
Pretty damn fast.
I mean, this is one of the things, it's like it takes a whole lot of power and faith, and it basically takes a small but direct intervention from one of the gods, but that is something that the dancer would never do. And right. Therefore, because the dancer isn't in the habit of performing miracles that people can actually see, she is, people who are either particularly grasping or ambitious or power hungry, or people who are just a bit stupid, are gonna look at that and think that is a more concrete example of the existence of a god. Maybe that's the god, maybe that means that god is more powerful, therefore that's the god I should worship. Right, instead of just dancing around the arrow.
Yeah.
If you're doubting Thomas, I think you're going on Team Red God, so not good.
Yeah, you're gonna regret it when you do, though.
Yeah, I mean, but you might just get tricked into it. Pricking your thumb to sign up to get some gold, which actually blood binds you to the evil guys. Is this an example of why we should always read the terms and conditions before we sign something?
Yes. It is a direct commentary on publishing contracts. It's not. Please don't fire me.
Oh, that was well done. Well done. It is like signing your soul over. Everyone's always talking about having their feet on the path, but no one ever talks about where this path is going.
The end of the path is either the afterworld, if you die, before the completion.
Pretty quick to these followers.
Before the completion of the Red Gods' plan. But the ultimate plan is that the Red Gods return and exist side by side with their followers on the earth. And basically the end of the path is the fact that you can actually see and hear and experience your gods on the earth with you while you're still alive.
That's actually pretty sweet. Prince Janus Evandoom walks into a bar and gets killed. Ha motherfucking ha. Is Chris a master joke teller?
Chris is having a bit of a crisis at this point. I think he is having a mild breakdown. He is Crisis Chris. He is kind of like the Joker of the trilogy, which kind of makes sense as his character develops through the sequels. But seeing as we're only spoiling Godblind, not the whole trilogy, I can't tell you what that means.
Because I read the wrong book.
But yeah, he is sort of my characteristic happy-go-lucky soldier of fortune, almost, with hidden depths, shall we say.
Ooh.
Who's not particularly great at telling jokes.
I thought that was hysterical. If Halos is some kind of happy-go-lucky Joseph Mengele.
Ouch. Okay.
Are these breath experiments true in any way? Because after reading this, I sat by a lit candle and I just kept breathing it in, and now I've got whooping cough.
Yeah. Actually, I'd say he's probably more of a John Hunter from this book I'm reading at the moment. He's just like, he's so insatiably curious that he probably did do a shit ton of stuff to himself, and then realized that actually he could just do it to stupid people instead who were desperate for the money. I think I did probably just make that up, unless I happen to have read it and it's just one of those abstract factoids that is swirling around the back of my head somewhere. Although, I mean, obviously, a lot of the Nazi doctors did do some pretty horrific things to prisoners during World War II. So there probably was a lot of stuff about how long can you hold your breath, or what happens if you breathe in hydrochloric acid instead of oxygen or whatever. But he's definitely not supposed to be an allegory for a Nazi doctor. He's a nice guy. Halos is nice. We like Halos.
This does bring us to one of the few segments on this show, which is where I pitch a novella idea and the author tells me they hate it. So are you ready for this?
Okay, cool. I am very ready for this. This
book is called The Angel of Almost Death. And
I hate it.
Halos is a curious man. And
yes,
as a curious man, he's in a predicament. How can he explore this curiosity until he realizes one day at a bar that if you just give a man a coin, he'll let you do pretty much whatever you want to him. And this starts a dangerous path of discovery, but the real discovery is within.
The real discovery is that they were friends all along. I mean, I don't hate it. I do think it will be like an alternate timeline. If Halos's curiosity was actually given utterly free rein, rather than being reined in. I didn't want to use that word twice.
It was good though. I liked it.
So the king is a bit like, okay, reel it in, mate. Durdil is very much like, leave my fucking soldiers alone. I can't believe, stop experimenting on them. So he doesn't quite have as much free reign as he wants.
Oh man, you got word vomit right now. I can see how this is affecting you.
Yeah, this is what happens when someone is like, I'm going to take your characters and write them for you. I'm like, I'm coming out in hives here.
Yeah, this is what you really want to do is hit the end button.
But I could absolutely see a novella about Halos's early years, as he becomes a better physician, and the many mistakes he makes along the way. Yeah.
Well, if any agent ever starts reaching out on Twitter looking for something specific, because that's how you found yours, I will be sure to pitch this for you.
There you go. Perfect.
That innkeeper who was stabbed to death by his wife for sleeping with his stepdaughter seems a little dramatic.
Really? I think that's a fair and proportionate response, to be honest.
It's hot on the internet streets right now, so I don't.
I mean, it's like if I had a kid and my second husband slept with that kid, I'd be pretty pissed off. It's like, the whole trading in for a younger model thing. Also, the fact that you have corrupted my fair and virginal daughter, and also
that part was not mentioned. No one knows about the innocence of this daughter.
That was implied, surely.
That's
I'm slightly worried the fact you keep waving a knife at me. Am I supposed to?
It is a very dull letter opener.
I've got a ruler.
No, you've got an Italian longsword somewhere, so don't come at me that you're threatened. What the hell am I going to do with this letter opener?
True, very true.
And I'm a danger to myself, unlike you who pretended to whack herself in the face. I actually would do it.
For science.
Not whack you, whack myself. How good a strategy is it to keep getting demoted so you never get more responsibility?
Say that again, sorry.
How good of a strategy is it to continuously get demoted so that you never get any responsibility?
I think it's an excellent strategy.
I agree.
I would definitely do that. I mean, when I was working at my last place, like every year when I had my appraisal, they'd be like, right, so we think it's time you stepped up and became more senior, and there's a management role opening. Do you want to go for it? But like, no, no thanks. I mean, the thing was, the reason why was because, if I became more senior, then I was going to end up working more hours and having more responsibility that I would be thinking about in the evenings, which would therefore make me more tired and less likely to have the time or inclination to write. So I was quite honest about the fact that I wanted to balance work and writing. But, I mean, nobody believed that I actually was taking writing seriously or anything like that. So it was always just like, oh, that sounds like a really shitty excuse. You're just lazy. And I'm like, but also I don't believe that continually moving higher up the corporate ladder is the route to happiness. I mean, if you find a job that you're good at and you enjoy and it pays you enough, why do you then have to leave that and become management? I'm all for just staying where you're happy.
I agree. Did you throw Godblind at them after? And you were like, told you I was doing something.
In hardback.
Yeah.
I didn't, but I was kind of smug when the news broke that I'd signed my publishing contract and I could finally talk about it at work.
Right. That had to, oh, what a day of coming into work that had to be when that rumor started.
Yeah. So it was because I knew it was going to be announced that day at like 11 o'clock. So it was kind of like the minutes were ticking by and we got to like 11:15 or, something like that. And I was like sneaking on Twitter because I knew it was going to show up on Twitter first. And then when it finally happened and I was like, how do I actually tell? I can't just be like, hey, look at this. I was like, you gotta like, you've got to be a bit cool. You've got to be a bit cool about it.
Should have just stood up and screamed, fuck all you.
I was so tempted. So I think what I did at that point was I just did like a string of reply texts and then like retweeted it, just saying smart,
smart, subtle.
Thank you, thanks so much. I'm so looking forward. I'm really excited, blah, blah, blah. And then just retweeted it and then was kind of like looking around all my mates because I know that my mates follow me on Twitter. I'm like, come on, someone go on Twitter, check your fucking notifications.
You just, oh, well, I'm sorry, I tagged you in that by accident.
Just like have it open on your screen as someone walks past and be like, oh no, nothing.
Oh my God, that would be so funny.
So I think it took about 45 minutes before anybody noticed. It was the longest 45 minutes of my life. There was one person that I knew that I was close enough with at work that I had told. So when the news broke, as soon as she was out of her meeting, she kind of like came bouncing over and was, oh my God, congratulations. And she did that quite loudly in the middle
I was
of
going
the
to say,
office.
that was your friend's job there to really get that news out there.
And she did such a good job, because then people were like, what's going on? What? And so then she got to say, Anna's got a publishing deal. And I was like, oh, thank fuck, I don't actually have to stand there and say it myself.
Oh my God, perfect.
So yeah, so that was cool. That was a very cool moment.
Okay, the one serious question on this podcast, it's hard to imagine that those weren't all serious questions.
I know, I'm shocked.
One of the goals of this podcast is to break this stereotypical view of what fantasy is supposed to be. And I think actually you described this somewhere very well as pale, stale, and male. And so one of the things I like to do is highlight how fantasy is not that at a lot of times. It doesn't have to be just that. Mm-hmm. So what about your books kind of breaks that, that male, pale, and stale, which I love, by the way, and shows that
I can't take credit for that. I heard that somewhere years ago.
Well, this is the opportunity. Take all the credit you want.
I coined that phrase.
There you go. What about your books kind of breaks that traditional mold and brings fantasy to either unexpected audiences or the general audience, or just not the, stereotypical, which I believe is untrue, audience?
Okay. I think the Goblin trilogy, because it's got a big cast of characters and there's a fairly even split between genders, which was always important to me. Tara Carter is like hugely one of my all-time favorite characters. It was really important to me to get female warriors, female soldiers in there. The thing as the trilogy progresses is that it does critique things like the patriarchy, the prevailing attitudes towards Tara being in the army. It also, it critiques the fact that women shouldn't just fulfill the traditional roles. There's also LGBT characters in there, which I know a lot of people were really pleased that was in there. The Songs of the Drowned trilogy, I guess, goes a step further in that it's a gender equal and a queer norm society. So I think I've actually only written one straight character, like main point of view character. So it's it's really important that like nobody in any of the societies within that trilogy is ever told you can't do this because of your gender, or I don't like you because of your sexual orientation. Both of those things are just unimportant in the grand scheme of things. Obviously, important to individuals, but no one is ever persecuted or overlooked because of anything like that. So there's all genders in the armies. There's you can be, doesn't matter who you are, if you're going to be, you can rise to the absolute heights of power. You don't need to be a man to do that kind of thing. So those are good. And then I've also, it's plug time, I've also just had my first Marvel novel published.
I saw that. Congrats.
Thank you very much. The Serpent and the Dead, which follows Valkyrie and Lady Sif and Valkyrie's girlfriend Inga on a quest to discover who is stealing the souls that should be going to Valhalla. And that was just really great fun, because all of the main players are women. The heroes are all women, but also I sort of made a conscious decision to take take things that are seen as being detrimental. So like women are too emotional. So I took that and deliberately played with that expectation in that Sif and Valkyrie are being emotionally manipulated by an outside force. And their answer to dealing with that is to talk about their feelings. And they literally sit there and say, can you imagine doing this with Thor? Can you imagine trying to be like, tell me how you're feeling, Thor? Are you scared? Because his answer would be no. But actually by doing it, so by talking about their feelings, they're better able to monitor whether one of them is being coerced. So that was good. And I also managed to somebody tells Sif that she should smile. So in response, she stabs them in the chest and says, why don't you smile? You're prettier when you smile.
It's the only appropriate reaction to that question.
And my editor's comment for that was just, damn. I was like, yep, we're going all in on this one.
I mean, yeah, that's a fantastic answer. So I really do appreciate that. Just in case you were worried this interview was about to get serious, it's not. So
thank God for that.
Because one of the things that this podcast also is very focused on is dick jokes in fantasy books. And this book has some good ones. Can I read some of my favorites out to you?
Please do. Please do.
This one actually made me just crack up. Rivel dropped back to walk at Chris's side. Bit of a limp there, he whispered. Chris glanced at Janice, then back to Rivel. It's the size of my cock, he whispered. Drags me to the right. What's a man to do?
I mean, why not? Why not? I mean, I did say that Chris is, he may have multiple ongoing crises, but he's always got time for dick jokes.
She was standing over him again, moonlight liming her skin. He reached for the pain instead of her, willing his cock to wilt. Most people have to will it the other way.
I mean, I know exactly who is standing over him, so she can definitely attract someone's attention, shall we say?
I've got two good ones left. You undressed me. You would have preferred Tara? What? No. That's when Ash knew. Ash winked and threw him a pair of linens. I can say this with perfect honesty, Captain. You are not the first naked man I have seen in my life, he chuckled, nor the most well endowed. That was mean.
I know, but I liked it because it absolutely then counters what Chris had said to Rivel earlier in the book.
That is a good point. Now we know. That's the biggest mystery of this book. What are we talking about?
How big is Chris?
We've got two conflicting reports.
I mean, I'm glad you're asking the big questions here.
Yes. Yes. I think there's only one way to end this. And, I think you were waiting for when I was going to ask, what the fuck is wrong with you with the hammer scene? Why? I was gonna bring a hammer to the interview, but I'm not a man enough to own one. So that's I have to call my father-in-law whenever I need anything done.
Why?
Did that ever get asked?
That does get asked a lot. That does get asked quite a lot, actually. The simplest answer is sort of like growing up in like sort of watching a lot of TV and movies and stuff in the 80s and 90s. There was very much like a prevailing idea of basically there was a lot of sexual assault and rape in 80s and 90s TV and in 80s and 90s books and stuff like that. And I grew up thinking that was perfectly normal. That I grew up thinking that seeing women treated like that on the screen was okay and wasn't something that you needed to even think about or even wonder whether it was right or wrong. And then as I got older, and like the world started changing a little bit, and like feminism became more paramount, and people stopped talking about angry feminists and started thinking, actually, what, they've got a good point. And I started sort of reevaluating a lot of the films that I had watched and a lot of the stuff that media that I consumed when I was younger. And I started realizing that it had given me a real kind of quite a lot of unconscious internal misogyny. And I was like, I had to do a lot of work to sort of overcome all of that. So this, basically the Hammer scene is a throwback to, what, I spent 20 years watching people who look like me get abused, and that be considered absolutely fine. And I was like, so if we were to turn this around, what is the worst possible thing that I can think of to do to someone? And that was basically, that was the reason why that is my big fuck you to all of the problematic content that I grew up watching.
And let me tell you,
which is actually a serious answer.
Yes, it was a serious answer for a nail getting driven through someone's. You know what? Read the book, everybody. Thank you so much for doing this. Where can everybody find you? This is your chance to plug everything you got.
Okay, so I am on Twitter as @AnnaSmithWrites, Smith, not Stevens. My website is anna-stevens.com because I like to confuse people. I'm on Instagram as AnnaSmithWrites, and I'm on Facebook as Anna Stevens. So I have like two different personas.
So good luck is what?
yeah, basically good luck. And I've also got a Patreon as Anna Smith. No, I'm Anna Stevens on Patreon. So Patreon, I do like general updates. I do editing and deconstructing published work, but I also share a lot of cut scenes that never made it into the published books, which people seem to quite like. So it's like not alternate endings, but alternate chapters, things that if things had gone slightly differently in the Godblind trilogy, you might have had this instead. And then I also do original fiction every month. So Anna Stevens on Patreon, content unlocks from $1.
You're getting a lot of content for that. That's super exciting. Well, if that wasn't enough of a plug, go buy her books. They're fucking excellent. And that hardback is what she threw at her bosses when they tried to promote her. So there you go.
Yep,
thank you.
In the face.
Thank you so much for this. I really appreciate it. This was an absolute blast.
Yes, thank you. I've had a great time.
What a fun interview. Anna Stevens is awesome. The Hammer going into the nutsack, brutal. And I hope that I'll have her back on again soon. And Books on the Horizon time. Next week is going to be Hugo Award-winning author Jeanette Ung to talk about her book Under the Pendulum Sun. That interview took months to put together. Not in terms of like editing, because we all can tell that the editing cannot possibly take months. But in this case, just setting it up, and I'm super excited. It was an absolute blast. After that is coming up with self-pub darling Bjorn Larson in his first ever video podcast interview to talk about his book Children. And let me tell you, if that's his first time, I can't imagine what his 5th or 10th time is going to be, because he is awesome. And then what else could follow that up but Ryan Cahill's Of Blood and Fire? So, thank you everybody who's been rocking with me. Keep on reading or something. Peace.